This is the Gaming News Canada show presented by Bede Gaming. I'm your host, Steve McAllister. Well, if you're a proud card-carrying member of FIFA, you can't wait for Friday afternoon when Canada kicks off the Men's World Cup of Soccer against Bosnia and Herzegovina in the tournament opener at BMO Field/Toronto Stadium. The price gouging with tickets, the demands for police escorts in Vancouver, the ballooning costs to cities hosting these matches, and let's not forget, the gobsmacking presentation of a made-up peace prize to a narcissistic U.S. president will all fade into the background once the players take to the pitch. The competition and the interest it will attract from football fans and sports bettors is where we will place our focus on this episode. Global PR guru Simon Clare from Entain, the owners of BetMGM's Ontario online sportsbook, and longtime Canadian soccer pundit James Sharman will share their thoughts on what will happen over the 39 days, featuring for the first time 48 countries playing 104 matches in Canada, the US, and Mexico. Joining me now for his maiden appearance on the Gaming News Canada show presented by Bede Gaming is the Group Director of Consumer PR and Sponsorship, the UK brands for Entain, Simon Clare. Simon, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, listen, thanks for having me on. I'm really privileged to be here.
Hey, listen, Simon, England has its final World Cup tune-up match tomorrow in Orlando against Costa Rica. Three Lions open their tournament in the same Florida city on June 17th against Croatia. They then play Ghana and Boston on June 23rd and finish the Group L preliminary round on June 27th against Panama in New Jersey. Before we get into the soccer bit, Simon, you've been doing this for quite a while now. I did a little bit of research before the interview, and I saw that this month marks 33 years since you started your career in the industry as executive assistant of the British Horse Racing Board.
Yeah, that was a long time ago. God, yeah, that's going back some. I mean, yeah, I worked in horse racing for a few years, and then I joined. I always thought it might be quite fun to work for the bookie, the odds maker. They seem to have a lot of fun. So I joined Coral way back in 1997. We merged with Ladbrokes, about 10 years ago. And in all that time, it's been great fun talking odds across a wide variety of sports, obviously primarily football and horse racing in the UK, and attending lots of great events. And it's whizzed by, so I can't quite believe it's been 3 decades.
You were talking, joking off camera about sending press releases by faxes, and I it's funny. I made the transition from being a sports journalist to public relations about the same time as you started your career working at Tennis Canada and then joining the National Hockey League Players Association. And we have a really good sports business publication called Sports Business Journal. And back then, Sports Business Daily launched, and it was literally a summary of all the news happening in the business of sport across North America. It was a 15-page fax that got sent at noon every day. And you look at your career and where it is now, we're light years ahead of that, aren't we?
Oh yeah, listen, I mean, as I said, it was crazy. You'd be sending press releases by fax, and sometimes the newspapers would run out of fax paper, and the press release wouldn't get through. And I mean, without sounding for your younger viewers who think we're two old fogies talking about the old days, but I mean, the arrival of the internet. Oh God, it sounds so funny to say that now. In the early, into full effect in the early noughties, just revolutionized everything. Revolutionized communications, information flow. And it revolutionized betting, and that's where suddenly you could offer your product, as a bookmaker across the world. You could put a huge full range of markets. We now talk about football matches having 300 different markets on every match. Well, back in the day when people walked into betting shops, as they did in the UK, you could only really cope with what you could put on a coupon or could see on a screen on the TV screen. So it just suddenly changed the whole growth of betting in the UK. And as we've seen over the last 2 decades across the world, really, most notably in the last 10 years in North America with the legalization of sports betting and the fact that it's so easy to present this wide array of odds and markets to consumers, which, as I said, I look back and you can't quite believe how much it's changed.
I'd like to talk a bit more about that, Simon, only because, I read over the weekend that there's some reporting out there that they estimate up to $60 billion could be bet on this World Cup. And again, pointing to the fact that the tournament's expanded from 32 countries to 48 countries. You're going to have 104 games. They're expecting wagering. You mentioned the overturning of PASPA back in 2018, that there could be up to $4 billion bet in the U.S. Just how dramatic has that change been with betting on the World Cup, and maybe elaborate just a little bit more on if you remember your first experience working and betting with the World Cup of soccer and where we are today.
Yeah, my first probably memory of working for a bookmaker with the World Cup was 1998. Was France. England got knocked out with David Beckham getting waved a red card against Argentina. Obviously, David Beckham now practically a citizen of North America himself, isn't he? But and back then it was very parochial. Obviously, we really focused almost on the patriotic money. English fans optimistically thinking England might win, and of course they never did, and that was always good for bookmakers. But it's just, I suppose, the globalization of betting and the ability to reach so many people through your sports books has also run in parallel with the growth of popularity of football. And there's no more global sport really than football. Formula One, I suppose, reaches a lot of countries and goes around the world. But beyond that, and most other sports have some degree of regionalization when it comes to the planet. But I think football is just an extraordinary, really popular, and that's why the World Cup. You see what FIFA have done with the World Cup. They've made it 48 teams from 32. It's 140 matches from 60 yards, and even FIFA are seeing the potential to grow the size and the impact of the World Cup. And so, yeah, I suppose if you look at the way sports betting has been legalized across the world and become more and more popular as a recreational, way to have fun with sport, and then the growth of football, it's a very progressive marriage, I suppose.
Like with BetMGM being based in the U.S. and obviously operating in Ontario right now and coming to Alberta later this summer, I think you make such a great point. And probably if this was happening 25 years ago, the World Cup of soccer might just be a blip for the sports book, but today I think it's very fair to say that this is far and away, even in North America, this will be the largest betting event we've seen.
Oh, I think absolutely. I think, listen, for North America, this is huge. I mean, and for BetMGM, it's massive. Just with sports betting and football betting growing, soccer betting, we should call it, growing in popularity, and the development, the opening up of legalized betting across the states in the US, the fact that it's in North America, it's spread across obviously Mexico, Canada, but and a huge part of it in the US. The timings of the matches are perfect, therefore, for that North American audience, means it will be, certainly the biggest betting World Cup in North America, and probably one of the biggest sports betting events. Ironically, the timings aren't so good for the UK, because quite a few of these matches are taking place at 2 a.m, 3 a.m, some even 5 a.m. Now, look, the British football punters do love betting on football, so I suspect a lot will be getting up, and plenty will still place bets and then wake up in the morning and see how they go. But I think for North America, it really is just it's heaven, really. You've got the biggest World Cup taking place in your time zone, and with the most developed and most user-friendly sports books, now in the continent. So I suppose, it's going to be huge, and it starts on Thursday.
Just the fact that the North American soccer fan is a lot more sophisticated than it was, 25 years ago. So I mean, again, I can remember, I have a 30-year-old son now, and getting up on Saturday mornings in the wintertime and getting him dressed to go to hockey practice, and him watching the Premier League games. And I would say, my son's generation, that was the first, kind of serious soccer fan, even though soccer's been around for a long time, and we've been able to watch soccer on TV for decades. I just wonder, with that and the fact that prop betting has become, and live betting has become, such an important part for bettors, that we might see some different trends in this World Cup, because North American soccer fans now, we know who Kylian and Mbappe is, and we follow what Erling Haaland's doing for Manchester City, and so I wonder if we're at a point now where it's just not trying to bet on Spain, France, or England on who's going to win the World Cup, or we're also going to be looking at the performances of players.
Oh yeah, I think you're seeing that across, and it's probably, I think that trend you're talking about with your son in North America is exactly the same in England. as young people grow up, because their access to information is so free, and they use YouTube. If they're playing FIFA, the gaming, they're really familiar with all the teams, all the players. It's quite extraordinary. My son will be playing, MLS teams on his get PlayStations, etc. So they seem to know everyone, and that means, as they grow older, and they, the knowledge of the players is huge. I mean, just looking at some of the trends, which I've spoken to my BetMGM colleagues, Spain are the most bet team in the US, whereas Portugal, funnily enough, are the team that the Canadian punters have been most popular, both in terms of tickets, with France in terms of volume of money. So, these are, it's not like sort of blind patriotic betting in any way. They're betting on what they believe is going to happen. Mbappe is the most popular, unsurprisingly, player to be top goal scorer. So I think, the knowledge and information flow is so great now, Steve, that actually people will want to have a reason to care about all these different matches. So many of the matches you wouldn't naturally necessarily have a vested interest in, like the first game, Mexico, South Africa. But now, with a bit of research, a bit of knowledge, you can almost decide which team you're going to back, literally with your dollars, and then watch the game with interest. And I suppose that's always been the very basis of betting. It gives you a reason to care.
Are there certain prop bets, Simon, that you've seen or you're surprised at that have become popular, maybe beyond Mbappe to score more than one goal, or Mbappe to score the first goal? Like, are there some other prop bets that you've seen an increase in activity around?
I mean, I suppose some of the markets which prove particularly popular would be things like both teams to score is quite popular, or not to score. You're trying to anticipate, and that's particularly popular. In the UK, they like, sometimes if there's three matches on the day, you kind of roll them up, and predict the outcome of all three matches is always a way of, particularly when you've got short price favourites, you can create a bigger return for a relatively small stake is another way to play. Correct score betting's always been popular, because that gives you a chance to, again, rather than just pick the outcome of the game, you can get, you can turn something into a sort of plus 800, if you think they're going to win 2-0, the favourites. And so I think it's getting under, as punters or bettors look at the range of markets, you start to see different ways to ultimately win more for relatively little, which is what most players like, really, not having to risk too much, but still feel that if they get it right and they call it right, they get a good return. And there's so many markets. And of course, then in play, when you're actually watching the match, you start to feel that you sense the momentum of a side, or maybe a side make a comeback. The fact that you can reach in and actually, effectively put some money down when you feel you're reading the direction of the game, I think is a great, is proving more and more popular, as you'd expect, with in-play betting.
I think the one thing to mention too, and we deal with responsible gaming a lot on this podcast, and again, it's an event that's taking place over 39 days. As we mentioned, it's 104 matches, and I'm a very casual bettor, but the way I've approached prop or live betting is to really just have some fun with it and bet a $1 here and $2 there, and to your point earlier, Simon, it's kind of just about engagement and watching the game and seeing trends in that. So I think that's an important message to get across, that for people out there, the betting piece should be fun, and it shouldn't get you into trouble. And in a lot of regards, it's not a whole lot different than going to watch a match with your friends at a bar, just having a good time.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a bit like you're deciding what your budget is. It's there's a lot of matches. It's a lot of 404 matches over 39 days. But you can have a lot of fun for very little when it comes to having a wager, really. Because there is, the minimum stakes are tiny, and it is more. It's a bit, you bet what you can afford. Absolutely, work it out. Don't chase a lot. There's so many things, we've all been there and experienced it. Never chase your losses. Decide you're going to risk $5 or $10 or whatever it may be, and just place it down. And if you decide you want to be able to bet and play, have your budget ready. But because the main thing is, it's it's really being proved right or wrong, isn't it? That's what we're really doing. We're sort of putting our money where our mouth is, with that feeling of vindication when you've made the right call. It's not a way to try and improve your income or pay for the next holiday. Every now and then people have these lucky, they land these lucky wins, which may do that, but definitely that shouldn't be the objective anyway, should it, Steve? So the main thing is to have fun. I mean, there's a lot of football. I probably won't be able to watch plenty of the games. I'm not sure I'm going to get up for all of them in the middle of the night.
Right.
But I love World Cups. I love World Cups when they're on your same time zone, because if you bar work, obviously, to some extent, if you can set aside enough time to watch all these games with all these different nationalities, whether it's Curacao, Uzbekistan, the European sides, the African sides, it's a clash of cultures and footballing styles, and in your own country and your own time zone, you want to watch as many as you can, but so many of them, having a flutter will give you that little more reason to follow a player, hope for an outcome, and sometimes win some money. But if not, you probably enjoyed the game all that more because you've really engaged with it.
Yeah, and I think as we've seen with the Olympics and other other big global sporting events, there will be new heroes will emerge. There'll be players that we've never heard of before who all of a sudden will have scored in 3 straight games, and we'll get excited about that. Or there'll be a country, James Sharman mentioned, he wouldn't be surprised to see an African country have a long run at the World Cup, just because the conditions are going to be pretty hot. Those teams are better suited to play in hot weather. So that there's fun to that. I just wonder, for a Canadian soccer fan, and I think obviously bettors like me are often swayed by emotional ties to a team, Simon. I just wonder what advice you would give to someone who's a Canadian soccer fan who's cheering for Canada to do really well. And because of that attachment, is most of their betting activity, they would be focused on the Canadian side.
Well, look, I think Canada have got a great chance of getting out of their group. I think it'd be tough to win it because Switzerland are just really consistent when they come to these big tournaments. So Switzerland are favourites for Group B, but Canada are second favourites, plus 200. Bosnia aren't a strong side. They came through the playoffs, but I think they'll struggle in the heat, and they're the third favourites. In Qatar, really look to be the whipping boys in that group. So I think the Canadian fans, it'll be a good game against Switzerland. I wouldn't necessarily be confident of beating them, but I mean, if you could get a point from that game, that'd be where I'd be focused on. But I definitely think you'd be looking to win against Qatar. Maybe 2-0, 3-0 might be what you want to be looking at. And Bosnia, I think you've got to go in there and hope that Canada can beat them, and then you qualify in second place. And I think I was doing one of those great bracket challenges or predictors where you try and work out who the hell you may be playing in the second round. And it looked like you could be playing someone like Czechia in that last 32. And if you get past them, and I don't think, if they played them, if it worked out that way, they're not a super strong side from Europe. You then could be playing someone like Netherlands and Morocco in the last 16. I think if you got there, you'd take that as a massive success for Canadian football. So I think definitely focus on those 3 group matches, and with a degree of optimism and hope, certainly in 2 of them, and not without hope against Switzerland, because again, we talked about the conditions. European sides do struggle with the warmer, more humid weather. They'll have to change the tempo they play to. They won't be able to play that high pressing game, and if they try to, they'll run out of steam. So again, Canada, I'm sure they've become a stronger outfit, and I think you could see some lower scoring games, particularly in the group stages. And that's where, even without making it sound boring, a 0-0 draw would be more than good enough for Canada against Switzerland.
Right. BetMGM has Spain as the favorite right now, or they did on Sunday at plus 550. France is plus 600, and England's next at plus 800. Any thoughts, Simon? Like, is there a country you really like to win this thing?
No, I would love England to win it. I just feel maybe that they tend to struggle when they get into those, particularly such a long, drawn out tournament in hot weather. Might be a stretch for them. Argentina seem weak in the betting, which is interesting. The money seems to be coming for Portugal, a really strong squad. Players you should be able to cope with the conditions, and they've got a deep squad. So they've been particularly well backed. Spain, very popular, obviously reigning European champions, great stars like Lamine Yamal, players like Rodri, experienced players. And France, of course, they just got a wonderful, wonderful squad with the likes of Mbappe and Dembele, Elise. But, it's a long tournament. Brazil don't look strong. Normally, you'd look for the South American sides, which is why I suppose Argentina are the shortest price to them. But if you are looking for outsiders, not necessarily to win it, but Morocco got to the semi-finals 4 years ago. I think you mentioned the African sides. I think Morocco and Senegal could go a long way. And some of the maybe overlooked South American teams like Ecuador, who qualified really well. They did have altitude advantage during qualification, but actually they had some good away performances when they didn't have that advantage, and they may be a sort of surprise package. So I think it's when you focus on who's going to win the tournament, it might end up being one of that top 6 in the betting. And I think Portugal and Spain and France, probably there's a 3. I think they look the 3 strongest sides. But I do think there's the potential for some of the relatively less considered nations to go a long way in such a long tournament in these conditions. So like everything, I think it's worth having a little study and forming your own views and maybe taking a bit of punt on a bigger price team, because we've seen it before. They can go a long way.
Is there a dark horse, Simon, that you think, hey, it might be worth putting a few dollars on? That's a real long shot, but might sneak up on some people?
Oh, it's a good call. I did look at Colombia. I mean, James Rodriguez is getting on a little bit, but he's still sort of pulling the strings for the Colombian side. I think Japan will do well, for example. I think they're a very well organized side. I think they've got some really talented, exciting players playing in the big leagues. As I said, I sort of feel these are sides who could probably produce some surprises along the way. So when you're looking at the matches, you might sort of try and anticipate where there might be upsets. It's quite hard to sustain a run when you don't have the strength and depth of the squad as some of the big countries do to go all the way. But I think I'd certainly look at some of those sides to outperform their prices in the matches, etc. Maybe in their groups. But I'm veering away from some of the European sides you might have looked at, like Norway with Ødegaard and Haaland. But I think again, in the climate, in the conditions they'll face, I think that they'll struggle. And similarly, Belgium, maybe that golden generation of Belgian players reaching the end of that era and may struggle. So I'd probably, on the whole, bet against the Europeans when they're facing African or South American opposition. I think US will do well. I think home advantage is big. I think they'll win their group. It's a tight little group with Paraguay and Turkey. And who knows? Again, looking at the predictions, they could play Algeria in the last 32, and then maybe play Belgium or South Korea in the last 16. They could win those games, particularly against the knockouts and penalties come into play. So I think the US could go a long way. It's hard. I think there's a lot of depth to the World Cup, and I don't think I think outside of maybe the real flair squads like France and Spain and Portugal, I think there's not a huge amount. Then I think it's probably quite a level playing field, and I'm really looking forward. I'm hoping for lots of surprises. We don't want it to be too predictable. Right.
Hey, Simon, last question. I was fortunate enough to cover 3 Olympic games on the ground, and it's kind of a marathon on one hand, a sprint on the other hand, but there's a real adrenaline rush to being involved in a big sporting event. And I just wonder for you and your colleagues in Entain what that's like, especially for the traders. I'm sure you have some insight. And again, if you're a trader and you're looking at 104 games in 39 days, that's at first blush, that appears to be a pretty daunting challenge. But what's it like inside a sports book around a big event like this?
Well, I work closely with the football traders here at Entain, and they love it. I mean, this is what they live for. They're all football fans. They'd be watching it and consuming it if they didn't work in that team. And they work very closely. Obviously, they're supplying the odds across the world. That in itself is exciting. Where once it would have been just for the UK, now it's they're working obviously with the BetMGM team to provide all the markets across North America as well as in South America, Australia, and Europe. And and that is thrilling. You feel you're involved. You've got a stake in the whole event. Of course, it's being run by FIFA. Of course, it's all for the fans and the teams. But actually, providing the betting and ensuring that you've got this entertaining, wraparound of the World Cup is massive. And you've worked at the Olympics, Steve. It's brilliant to be involved and feel like you've got a voice in the action. Which, of course, when you're running the odds and communicating as I'll be where the money's going, what's happening, it's great. I'm actually going out to. For 9 days, I'll be in Boston for 5 days for the England Ghana game, and then I'll go to. I'm going down to Manhattan with my son to see England Panama in New Jersey. So, and I can't wait. I've been very lucky that I went to Russia in 2018 and for the European Championships in 2016 in France. And as you say, just to be on the ground with all the different fans, the media, the cameras everywhere, the way it takes over cities and countries is really special. It's a celebration like an Olympics, and you just want to kind of feel it and be a part of it. And I hope everybody across Canada and America and obviously Mexico gets to feel that. So I'm sure we haven't touched on the fact there was a World Cup in the US back in 1994. Brazil beat Italy. England didn't even qualify for that. Can you believe it? But I feel like that was 32 years ago. this is going to be light years different from them. That was an early skirmish of America, sort of, holding the World Cup and getting a feel for it. But, the popularity of soccer in North America now is so huge. I think it's going to be an amazing, amazing tournament. And as I say, I'm going to be there for 9 days, feeling it. I hope you guys are going to have a brilliant time across the 39 days.
That is Simon Clare, the Group Director of Consumer PR and Sponsorship at UK Brands for Entain. Hey, Simon, thanks so much for doing this. Enjoy your time in the U.S. during the World Cup, and we look forward to following what's going on with BetMGM and its coverage of the World Cup of soccer.
Thank you, Steve.
Is your iGaming platform ready for Alberta? Bede Gaming is ready to support your new market entry with a SOC 2 compliant platform, multi-tenant infrastructure model, and unlimited configurability. Future-proof your iGaming performance today with a solid foundation for your next province. Bede Gaming is your partner for success. Get in touch at bedegaming.com. We welcome to the Gaming News Canada show presented by Bede Gaming, the Dean of Canadian Soccer Journalists and Broadcasters, the host of the Footy Prime podcast, and just as importantly, the co-founder and chief tasting officer of Sharman's Proper Pies, the one and only James Sharman. Hey, James, how's that for an introduction?
Steve, that's good, man. I think you nailed it pretty much. Yeah, thank you.
Hey, before we get to the other stuff, how's the pie business going?
It's good, thanks. Yeah, it's good. It's always growing. It's scaling is fun. Any business owners out there can understand that. It's always ups and downs and challenges, but overall, it's really good. Yeah, great experience. And, it's a quiet time right now with the summer, but we're planning for the fall and when pie season kicks in, which is our favorite time of year.
Well, you have my deepest respect, James, wearing several hats, including a baker's hat. So good on you, and appreciate you doing this. And we're recording this on Wednesday, June 3rd, and you're joining us from Montreal, where the Canadian national team's getting ready for its final World Cup of Soccer tune-up match with Ireland. And just in case any of our listeners or viewers have been snuggling with a volleyball named Wilson on a deserted island so far in 2026, Canada opens its World Group B schedule on Friday afternoon in Toronto against Bosnia and Herzegovina. Canada's ranked 30th in the FIFA rankings going into the tournament. Bosnia and Herzegovina is ranked 65th. James, maybe just start. How do you feel about this Canadian team? I mean, I'm not a dyed-in-the-wool soccer guy like you. Certainly not as formed as you, but I do know that the Canadian team is facing some injury issues right now heading in the tournament. Obviously, the biggest one is Alphonso Davies, and it looks like Davies won't be available if and until Canada gets through to the next round of the tournament. But just overall thoughts on the Canadian team.
Yeah, it's a real disappointment with the injuries at the moment. They're a really good team. They're not going to win the World Cup, but they're a team that could make some noise. Should have expectations to get through their group, even with the injuries, although it is actually quite a tough group, in my opinion. But, they've suffered these injuries to some real key positions. You mentioned Alphonso Davies, of course, who's actually been out of action for over a year with Canada. They played way more games the last number of years without him than with him. Now, they are better with him because he's the only player that Canada has with that type of presence and danger on the pitch, a player that other teams really fear. But, he won't be available for a while, if at all. And I have my reservations whether we'll see him at all, no matter what happens, quite honestly. But beyond him, you have defensive issues at the middle of the park with Moise Bambido, who's recovering from a broken leg, hasn't played a match in anger, at least not a full match anyway, since October. Derek Cornelius hasn't played for his club Rangers in months through an injury, and then he fell out with the manager. Alistair Johnston has just got back from hamstring surgery, so he's playing well, thankfully. And then up front, you got Promise David. This I don't know how to describe Promise David. He's a, I don't want to say a freak of nature. It's unfair, but he is a beast, an absolute beast who's prolific in the Belgian league. Is going to be a very well-known player very, very soon, but is coming off hip surgery. He's barely played in the last number of months. So they've got all these issues, these question marks on this team, which is really disappointing. But, even without these players, they can play good football. We saw that this past year. They beat Romania in Europe 3-0. They've got some good results behind them. So I don't want to get too down on them because of the injuries. At full strength, they're a tough team to beat. with the injuries, they can still be very competitive, put it that way.
You mentioned the challenge they face in the group, and they'll play a number 55 ranked Qatar on June 18th and number 9 Switzerland in its final preliminary round game on June 24th. Both those matches are being played in Vancouver. It wasn't that long ago, James, where we looked at the national team and we thought, A, if they got to the World Cup, that was great. B, if they scored a goal, that was a huge success. I think the bar has been set a much higher for this edition.
100%, yeah. Now it's okay. Get the first win, number one, right? And that should be, if you can't beat Bosnia, and they can beat Bosnia, Qatar is a match you have to win. They're not a very good side at all, in turmoil right now. But quite honestly, the expectations for this group are to get beyond the group phase. If they don't do that, it will be disappointing. Now, there are already, let's be honest, baked-in excuses, and they're legitimate excuses with the injuries, I think. But really, you look at the Bosnia team that is, drawing from a pretty small talent pool, but they're a talented team, and they've got the Eastern European resolve, and tenacity. They're a very hard team to beat. They're there. They haven't been in many World Cups before. They've got a lot of history in that country, obviously playing for their country folk. So they're a team that won't be easy, but Canada, are good enough to beat them and will be the favorites in that match. And then you got Switzerland in the last match. Now, Switzerland's a very, very good team. They took England to penalties 2 years ago at the Euros, for example. They always do well at tournaments. They've got stars. If you can enter that match having already qualified, and with the expanded World Cup, Steve, 48 teams, the 8 best third-place teams also qualify. So if you're finishing your top 2, you're through, and then 8 of the best third-place teams can also get through. So there's a very good opportunity here, even if they don't beat Switzerland, even if they enter that match on 4 points, even 3 points, there's a good chance they can get through. So that's where we're kind of at right now. The permutations, Steve, we look at tournaments, in any sport, and we go through the bracket, right? And who you might, don't try that for this tournament. It's so convoluted. In fact, if they finish in third place in their group, and they do advance, there's 450 odd permutations as to who they're playing in the next round. So if they win the group, then they could play the USA maybe in the round of 32, possibly Portugal maybe in Vancouver in the round of 16. We know that, but let's not go there. Let's go one match at a time.
Hey, James, just on the new format, at first blush, 48 countries seems like a lot. 104 games being played in 16 cities across Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. sounds pretty daunting as well. Are you a fan of the expanded format?
No, way too many teams. I really wonder about football fatigue by the end of this thing. That's a lot of soccer, and I love soccer. I watch every game of the World Cup. Always have. I don't know if I'll manage it this time. That's a lot. And when you have this, as I mentioned there, the 8 best third place teams, it's too much for me. A World Cup should be the elite. 32 teams just works well. You have, 8 groups of 4 teams, top 2 go through, boom, simple. When you have 48 teams, it's just too many. I know what they say. FIFA says all the right things. Oh, we want to expand and give the opportunity to smaller nations. That's bull. We know why they're doing this, right? You have qualifying. That's why you have qualifying. So the actual tournament itself is the elite. So for me, it's too many. They're not going to change. They might even get bigger, this thing. Who knows down the line? FIFA, they're motivated by one thing, right? We know what that is, and that's why it's so big.
Not to get sidetracked, but that seems to be a challenge, I think, across all professional sports today, James, where we're seen to be really pushing the athletes to the limit. The NHL, we're playing 82-game seasons. As you know from living in Canada now, hockey players now grow up playing the game 52 weeks a year. I think the same can be said of all sports. It's very specialized now. We want kids at 10 years old to make a decision what sport they want to excel in, and that progresses right through the ladder until essentially you're done your playing career.
Yeah, exactly. And these are human beings. They're incredibly fine-tuned human beings, but when you look at the injury rate at the moment, I'm not sure how it's so much in other sports, but certainly in soccer, it's astronomical. It's through the roof. We've seen that with Canada, as mentioned there, all these soft muscle injuries happening. It's no coincidence that these guys don't have summers off anymore. You have World Cups, you have the Club World Championship last year, remember? A lot of these players who played in that tournament are in this tournament now. Next year, it might be a year off, maybe next summer's off somewhat, but By the time these players stop playing for their clubs, which is what, May, almost in June, they're back at camp by the beginning of July. They get maybe a month off, maybe once every 4 years. Otherwise, they're playing right through the top players. And you just can't do it. And with more, the Champions League expanding as well, the Europa League within Europe, you have the FA Cup in England, you have the League Cup in England, you have the Leagues Cup in MLS, and MLS expanding as well all the time. It's the players are suffering. It's that simple, right? The football suffers. Often at World Cups, we don't see the best of the best because a lot of these guys are knackered. They're exhausted. They've got nothing to offer, right? It's like the Stanley Cup in many ways. It's the battle of attrition. Who can stay somewhat healthy the longest, and they'll do the best. And to me, that's not the way it should be.
Hey, James, I know this is a gaming industry podcast, but I just want to put on my sports journalist hat for a second and just ask you, you look at this tournament, there's only 2 Canadian cities hosting games. I think there's only 2 teams in the tournament who are using a Canadian city as a home base. There's been a lot of controversy with FIFA and what we saw, what we've seen in Vancouver. There's been some controversy in Toronto over the Fan Fest. A lot of controversy around ticket sales for the tournament in general. I just wonder, will there be, I guess, what will be the legacy left for? I mean, the idea when you bring these kinds of events to a country is that there's going to be a legacy. And you mentioned FIFA and their motivation earlier. It's not a whole lot different from the Olympics, but with the Olympics, we do see some legacy in terms of venues being left and be able to turn an athletes village into some type of housing or whatever. Like, what will be the legacy for Canada from this tournament?
I'm not entirely sure because it's not as if we're building new stadiums or new facilities, are we? We're just not. Now FIFA are pumping money into the game during the World Cup, but is that going beyond the tournament itself? I'm not sure it is. I hope the legacy, and from a purely selfish standpoint, I hope it's from a media standpoint that we start getting treated like a real sport, and that corporate Canada starts investing in soccer media, for example, like they do in hockey and baseball and basketball, because quite honestly, we've been left behind from day one. It's been like smashing your head against a brick wall to get access and exposure over here. And I've been doing it for almost 30 years now. It's a statement on me. It's one getting so gray now, I think, having to work it. So legacy, yeah, I don't know. I really don't. You look at the noise around this tournament, and right now, like you mentioned, it's ticket prices, it's facilities here in Canada. And these are big issues and the concerning issues. But then you look at the noise around Qatar 4 years ago, it was migrant worker deaths. It was human rights, much bigger issues. Did they go away the minute the World Cup? No, I think they're probably still there. So there'll be this big noise for a while there. Once the football starts being played, we'll stop talking about the ticket prices and we'll just move on. Then FIFA will move its massive spaceship to the next city or cities in 4 years' time, right, and keep doing what they're doing. But I don't know. Legacy, I don't know, honestly, Steve. I mean, I hope that kids out there watching it will be inspired and want to play the game. I hope that, we often hear about these young girls who were motivated watching Christine Sinclair play, and now they're playing for Canada, or they're playing in the NSL, or the NWSL, or the WSL, right? And women's soccer really was elevated because of a player like Christine Sinclair. We already have those players, have had for a long time here in the men's game. Is the game growing? Well, I guess we'll find out in a few years' time when some kid who's captaining in Canada says, I watched Tajon Buchanan in 2026, and that's why I started playing football. Maybe we'll learn then.
It also feels like under Kevin Blue's leadership that Canada Soccer has its house in order now, and I think that is a huge factor to trying to give this, not the sport necessarily. The sport has credibility, but I think you know what I mean. That it's going to be a lot easier to cheer for Canadian soccer now that you have an organization that's not dysfunctional and isn't facing controversy and funding shortages and having labor disputes with the players all the time.
100%. Yeah, it's a brand new world here in Canadian soccer right now under Kevin Blue and Jesse Marsch, Peter Grusa, the president. They've really moved on. It's not perfect. The game in this country isn't perfect, obviously. The grassroots do need more money. But it's being professionalized under this leadership 100%. And they know how to knock on doors and talk in the boardroom and bring money into the sport. They know that. And they're doing it for the right reasons. So that's really important. I hope we can, keep these leaders around. Kevin Blue, for example, will he be lured somewhere else? Jesse Marsch just signed a 4-year contract. That's huge. That's massive. And part of that in his contract is connected to Kevin Blue staying there. So they're kind of attached. So if Kevin Blue stays, Jesse Marsch stays, it seems like, and vice versa. So that's a good thing for the next 4 years for sure.
Yeah, getting back to the tournament, James, I had a chance to look at some of the sports books getting ready for this interview, and the sports books are pretty much unanimous. It's Spain, France, and England are the favorites. Spain's at plus 450 as of this day. France at plus 500, and England at plus 600. I wanted to ask you, like, is England, is that a wishful thinking, a bit of odds making? I mean, that these guys are England's the Toronto Maple Leafs of men's global soccer. They haven't won the World Cup since 1966, and they are in Group L with Croatia, Ghana, and Panama. So maybe just your thoughts on England.
Well, sadly, England haven't got the first overall draft pick this year. That's a real shame. England, they in the betting, they always bring the money in from UK, right? The Brits are such degenerate gamblers that a lot of money comes in from there, which is why they look good on the books. But actually, on the pitch, they look very good as well. And they often do. They're a very good team. They have a German coach, Thomas Tuchel, who's no nonsense, doesn't care about your name. And that's something that previous managers have failed. They've been kind of lured over to the dark side with the fame and celebrity of some of these players. He doesn't do that. So he seems to be very much got his house in order. It's a highly talented squad, very good defensively. And Harry Kane is coming off one of the greatest seasons we've ever seen up front. So if they stay healthy, I think England could go a very long way in this tournament. And they could win it. I mean, I say that as an Englishman. I know people will just roll their eyes because Englishmen always say that. But right. I'm pretty honest most World Cups. I say, if they have a chance or not. And I think they do. I think you've got those three teams, and they are kind of the standalone teams, the best teams, it seems, the deepest teams, France, Spain, and England for sure. But then you got the Germanys just below there and the Hollands of the world. And then I haven't even mentioned Argentina, the defending champions. Brazil, you never rule out entirely. So there's a kind of a group of teams there that could still win it. I've got a feeling this World Cup, because it's longer, because of the conditions, it'd be very hot. You might see a team kind of out of nowhere, a dark horse, really do something this time around. I wonder if it's going to be a year where an African team makes some real noise, be it a Morocco or a Senegal. Morocco did really well last World Cup, of course, out of nowhere. They could do it again. Senegal, African Cup of Nations champions, just stacked with talent. Teams that can play in the heat a lot better than a lot of, say, the European teams. So I've got a feeling you might see a dark horse this year, and it could come from Africa. And I really hope so. I remember Pele. I remember talking to Pele with Elliot Friedman. This is it must be 1998, Steve, when you were on the score back in those days, right? And Friedge asked me to come along and chat with Pele for an interview. And me and Pele just making small talk. Just small talk, me and Pele. Right. What's going on? What he said was, you watch an African team this year, they're going to win the World Cup. He was wrong. He was definitely wrong. But maybe that hope of his will come to fruition this World Cup.
Hey, when you mentioned a dark horse, it got me thinking. Finland just won the World Hockey Championship, and Finland's a small country, but for whatever reason, when they bring their hockey team together for a major international competition, they're a real tough, really tough out, and they proved again this year. I wonder, is there a country that you would compare that with, where a team, where a small country, they shouldn't be swimming with the big fish, but they seem to do it every time there's a major international tournament?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. In soccer, not so much. I wonder, though, this World Cup, a team like Norway, talking about that part of Europe, that part of the world, Norway had an incredible qualifying campaign. They just dominated, in fact, at the expense of Italy, of all teams. And they're still playing really good football. They have maybe the best striker in world football, in Erling Haaland, who's going to be one of the faces of this tournament. He's just a prolific goal scorer for Man City in the Premier League. But behind him, they've got some real quality and very good defensively. They can make some significant noise as a dark horse. And they don't. I think it's their first World Cup in, I don't know how many years, a long time though. They don't qualify for tournaments very often, but this is very much a golden generation. They're one to look out for. And Sweden, for some reason, Sweden is a team that I don't know why, because they almost didn't get here. They qualified in a very roundabout way, but they got a new manager about 4 or 5 months ago now, a guy called Graham Potter. And the minute he arrived, they changed the way they played, and everything seemed to click. and they're very hard to break down. They've got some quality up top. They're a team that, for some reason, they're kind of a bit like Japan. You wonder, could this be the year for them? You know, those types of teams. I don't see a South American team having a great World Cup this time around for some reason. Argentina, you know, you have the Messi factor, of course, but they're an old team. And defending champions, it's very similar, that squad, to the squad this time around. Are they too old? And Brazil have a lot of question marks. They got a coach in Carlo Ancelotti, who's one of the greatest club managers of all time. Hasn't really done it before on the international stage. And they're lacking that typical Brazil star power. They haven't got it for this World Cup. You know, they got good players. Vinny Jr. is a legend at Real Madrid. He's great. Neymar is there for the time being, but he's old and he's broken and he's injured right now. They're lacking something, I think. So I could be proven wrong, but I don't think this will be the year for South America teams.
We see what Messi's done in the MLS. I just wonder, does he have one last big tournament in those legs?
Yep. You never doubt him, do you? I mean, really, you can't, because the minute you doubt him, he bounces back. He's adapted his game. You watch him play. You watch him for Inter Miami, and you say, who's the lazy guy out there just walking around doing nothing? And then suddenly he finds himself in the perfect position, and he's still got the quick, fast twitch muscle, and he can make that little move, that little dink or jink, and he can pick a corner from anywhere. So, yeah, he's still got it. But I mean, can you win a World Cup on the basis of one player? He got all the credit last time out for Argentina, but look, that team was incredible. From Rodrigo de Paul, you know, to McAllister, Alex McAllister. I mean, they were fantastic team. It was more than just Messi.
Yeah, it's funny watching some of those superstars, James. The only international soccer game I've ever seen was an Inter Milan Lazio game in Milan about 20 years ago now, and Ibrahimovic was playing, and I think Inter won 2-0 that game. And same thing, Ibrahimovic is just kind of, you know, he's kind of jogging and walking around, and they got 2 touches of the ball. One touch was made just a perfect 30-yard pass through about 3 players onto a guy's boot for 1 goal. And then scored the second goal again. Just got to the right place at the right time, and that's what makes those players great.
It is, yeah. It really is. Those little moments of genius. And now you see Ibra right now, everywhere right now in all the commercials. He's I don't know how much his money he's making right now in the commercials, but he's a star now off the pitch, isn't he? Some of those, I mean, Paddy Power, I'm sure you've spoken about before on the show. Their commercials are the best in the world. They're absolutely brilliant. They really are. So I ask you all to take a look on YouTube at Paddy Power World Cup commercials. They're superb.
Right. Hey, James, you mentioned Harlan. I just wonder, again, the sports betting operators are pretty bullish on this event. I saw one report a couple of weeks ago that estimated over $4 billion is going to be spent on wagering around the World Cup. We think in Ontario here, where you have, I guess probably about 30 legal sports betting operators, that June could be a great month, not just because of the World Cup, but you also have, the end of the French Open. You're going to have a week of Wimbledon. You got the RBC Canadian Open, the NBA and Stanley Cup Finals. So not a lot going on. But in terms of prop betting, like besides, the Harlans and the Messis, are there some other players out there that you think will be popular with bettors?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you look at the top teams. You want to go for the Golden Boot, for example. I mentioned Harry Kane, right? Who's
right.
A chance. But a player like Lamine Yamal at Spain and Barcelona, now he's going to miss the first couple of games with a hamstring injury. But it doesn't matter. This guy's prodigious. He's an incredible young. He's still a teenager. He broke through 2 years ago at the Euros. He was 18, I think, or maybe 17 back then. And since then, he's become maybe the best player in world football. So look at the Golden Ball markets for most goals scored. He's right up there. But in fact, he's missing a couple of games. The odds actually aren't too bad. So I would definitely, consider a player like him. Pedri, his teammate, also in the midfield. A player like, you look for the Golden Shoe, the best player overall. If Spain win this thing, everything kind of goes through Pedri. He's a wonderful footballer. A youngster as well, and this young, brilliant Spanish side. So someone, you can look at him, absolutely. France, Mbappe, always a popular choice, but France have that tendency every few World Cups to implode. Big egos, right? And there's no bigger ego than Mbappe. And is he going to implode or explode, right? He could score 10 goals in his time and win the World Cup, or they could crash out in the group phase after all falling out because of this guy. One to watch there as well. Yeah, it's younger players, like players who maybe you haven't heard of. A guy like Arda Güler in Turkey. Turkey's a team that no one's really talking about, right? A late qualifier. Again, for me, could be a dark horse in a pretty tough group. But he's a young player at Real Madrid who's really broken through there this year in the Champions League, and a player that could star this World Cup.
Hey, do you see a Canadian player, James, that could kind of be that Christine Sinclair, someone that comes out and ends up scoring 2 or 3 goals in the tournament?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think if it's not Jonathan David, then it might be Kyle Larin. Jonathan David is the more well-known player, having a tough season at Juventus, but we know the quality that he has. But Kyle Larin is a player who's been his partner for many years. Kyle's had a really rough year or so in Europe with Feyenoord and Mallorca, but then came over to Southampton in January and just rediscovered his form and scored a lot of huge goals for Southampton, who almost won promotion to the Premier League. But there was an incident called Spygate, very controversial. The players wasn't their fault. They're the victims. They were essentially banished from playing this big playoff final, so they couldn't get promotion. But Kyle Larin is a player I think that has the potential to score goals for Canada. But beyond the goals, a player that can really turn heads for me is going to be Ismail Kone. He's a midfielder, plays for Sassuolo in Italy, and joined there from Marseille last year. Now, Marseille, he started off really well, then fell out with the manager, who was a very polarizing figure, a guy called Roberto De Zerbi. And then he got loaned out to Sassuolo, and he's absolutely fantastic this year from the midfield. And you watch him out there again. This kid has matured before our very eyes. He's fantastic to watch. Just a smart, aggressive footballer, great eye for the pass. Positioning is fantastic. I think he could be our most important player, our Canada's most important player, given that, Fonzie's hurt, Bombito's not 100%. I think it's going to be a lot of emphasis on Ismail Kone in the midfield, and he could be a star.
Hey, James, before we let you go, can you just tell us, I know you're going to be a busy guy for the next 6 to 8 weeks. Can you just tell us what you're going to be up to?
Yeah, my main gigs will be with my podcast, Footy Prime the podcast. We're doing a daily show every day of the week in the morning. We're also going to be having a show on Sirius XM at 2 p.m. every day on the Canada Talks channel, which is great, just been announced. And we're excited about that. So a daily show there, a daily podcast as well. And then with Sportsnet, I'm traveling with Canada. Myself and Faisal Kamisa are on the road, on the ground, doing daily reports, interviews, covering Canada as far as they go. So we'll be starting in Toronto and then heading to Vancouver for a couple of weeks and maybe beyond, hopefully, if Canada sticks around.
In a Canadian sports media industry with many, many, many good people, James Sharman's at the top of the list. Hey, James, thanks so much for doing this. I know you're busy, so really grateful for you to give us a bit of time. And look forward to watching and listening to you over the next couple of months.
Thanks, Steve. I always enjoy this. So anytime, mate, just give me a call.
Great. Thanks, James.
Cheers.
That's it for this episode of the Gaming News Canada Show presented by Bede Gaming. Thanks again to Simon, Clare, and James Sharman for being our guests. You can listen to this show on the various podcast apps, and you can also watch my conversation with Simon and James on the Gaming News Canada YouTube channel. Thanks so much again to everybody who listens and watches this podcast, and we will see each of you very, very soon.